On this episode of the Irish History Boys, we explore attitudes to partition 100 years ago in the aftermath of the treaty and the Irish Civil War. We hear from an influential cleric who outlines his clear anti-treaty views at a speech in Limerick. And we reflect on the horror of the nuclear bombs dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki with an Irish News editorial on the 30th anniversary of the bombs.
August the 5th, 1925. The freedom of Limerick City was conferred last night on Archbishop Daniel Mannix at a specially convened meeting of the Borough Council, the Mayor, Councillor O'Brien, presiding. In acknowledging the presentation of freedom, Archbishop Mannix said he never aspired to any political prominence, as by nature and grace he was utterly unfitted to play that role. The people knew what his views and ideals were, as he never made any secret of them, as far as they related to Ireland, any more than he did to Australia. However, he never made any secret of the fact that if he had been in Ireland at the time, he would have refused to put his name to the document, which was now unfortunately inflicted on the country. He might have been wrong, as he was not infallible. When the treaty was signed, he would have endeavoured to get an admission from those who signed it that it was one under duress. And he would have endeavoured, if he had been in this country then, to help the Collins-de Valera pact, which gave a ray of hope for a united Ireland. He would also have endeavoured to keep the oath out of the Constitution.
Beautifully read there by Cormac Moore. Welcome to the Irish History Boys. I'm Tim McGarry and Dr. Cormac Moore. We're discussing all things Irish history. We take stories from the Irish News 100 years ago and 50 years ago. And Cormac, that is... I vaguely knew about Archbishop Mannix. He's an Australian bishop, but he's from Cork.
Yeah.
Those are the days we were exporting priests and archbishops instead of importing them as we do now. And he was a very influential figure. And here he is outlining his pretty clear anti-treaty stance.
Yeah, he was close to De Valera and known for that, but he'd been very prominent through the Irish Revolutionary years. So he's back in Ireland to receive the freedom of the city of Limerick 100 years ago this week, and he quite clearly comes out down on the anti-treaty side. You know?
Right.
Everyone thought that had kind of been done with at this stage. You know, the Civil War is over, a couple of years. You know, we're going through the Boundary Commission at the time. You know, and Éamon de Valera is let out of prison, you know, so he's trying to get back into politics, get back into some position of authority. So I presume he was quite upbeat to hear Mannix promote him in many respects.
Very pleased to hear this. I forgot De Valera was in jail, wasn't he, during the Civil War?
He was interned, no, not during it.
After the
August. So August 23, he was actually, it was during the general election campaign of 1923. Right. He was given a speech in Ennis. He was lifted and interned
for a hate speech. What did he say?
No, it was he was a Republican, and they actually interned and imprisoned people after the end of the Civil War. Kept the ones that are already there. There was about
thousands, weren't there?
13,000 of them
interned
or in prison by the late 23. About 8,000 of them went on hunger strike, and it was only kind of by summer of 24 when they were let out. So De Valera was not let out until I think July 1924. So he was kind of rehabilitating himself into the Irish politics.
Right. And Mannix here is saying basically he wouldn't have signed the treaty. They shouldn't have signed the treaty. It
was signed under duress. Do you think it was? Like, you like the treaty? Well, you've discussed.
Well,
the
treaty I'd be certainly pro-treaty.
You're pro-treaty.
I would be pro.
Would you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Would you? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
Why? No, absolutely pro-treaty. Yeah, I think it was the best offer they could have gotten. Now in the north, they obviously they mucked up on the Boundary Commission thing very badly, but it was probably the best thing.
I would actually agree with you.
And my argument with the Republican side is, you know, particularly when the Civil War is fighting, what are you fighting for? You're fighting to say, right, we're ripping up the treaty and what? We're going back to war with the Brits? How does that work? No.
Well, it is more complicated. Like, I do think that Michael Collins' assertion that this is a stepping stone was correct in every part.
Freedom to achieve freedom.
Except for partition.
Yeah.
I think they really messed up spectacularly with the North. But when it came to everything else, he was right. And actually, it was De Valera who proved he was right when he got into government. He was the one who broke down all of those
30 years
those
of the
clauses.
Republic, or 20. Yeah.
No, but in terms, but he did make a republic. That was John A. Costa's government, but he made it all but a republic, in all but name. But De Valera was ahead of his time though as well, in that he proposed kind of an association with the British Empire. And that's what the British Empire agreed to less than 10 years later.
Yeah.
So it wasn't completely out there. It wasn't that radical that it wasn't considered not so long afterwards. And we have to remember the people who fought in the War of Independence were they were fighting in many ways in the memory of those who died in 1960. For a republic. For total freedom for Ireland. And there was this purity, many people believed, to that fight. A lot of relatives were still around, a lot of people who fought in it, like De Valera was a very prominent figure, Collins fought in it. So it was very difficult for them to compromise on it for a lot of people at the time.
Yes, but the political purity always comes up against practical reality, and they knew.
But De Valera was a pragmatist too.
De Valera went after the truce in 1921, went to London, knew there wasn't going to be a republic on offer.
Yeah, but he never asked for a republic.
Yeah, well, he wanted one, but the Republican position was, where's the republic?
No, but he asked for an association.
Yeah,
so he wasn't
external association.
External association. So you would accept the king was head of that external association, the Commonwealth.
But was that not hair splitting? I don't think people would.
But these are important things, though. It's not hair splitting. I don't think it is, because the head of the state under the treaty was the king.
Yes,
whereas the head of state under what De Valera's terms that he was looking for would not have been the king, and that was a big thing. That's a big deal,
the big deal is
that's independence or not independence.
The big deal was taking an oath to the king, which several years later.
Well, it wasn't particularly old. The king appoints.
And says it's only a form of words.
The king appoints the Governor General as well, who's the king's
De
representative in the country.
Takes it 10 years later and says it's only a form of words. Sorry about that. What about the Civil War? Yeah. I mean, I think Republicans. What were they hoping to achieve? What did they think they were going to achieve during the Civil War by rejecting the treaty?
Well, a lot happened between the signing of the treaty and the start of the Civil War in June, and there was in June 22 there was a lot of attempts to broker. A deal, and even Collins tried to have his cake and eat it. I've never understood that term though. Why wouldn't you have eat your cake? But anyway, he wanted to make sure there was no oath in the Constitution.
Yes,
that was never going to fly with the British government. So, but he was trying that for a number of months into 1922, and eventually he had to change that and put the oath into the Constitution. So look, there was attempts to stop the Civil War, but it just spiraled out of control, and it was such a mess. It was a disaster. The Civil War was just awful in so many ways, so many
vicious,
and just
personal,
put back the country.
So much. It helped copper fast and partition as well. I think without a doubt. That they when you're saying that Republicans were fighting for United,
let's just say
put back there.
It made it easier for Unionists or British stakeholders to argue against the United Ireland because of the Civil War.
And it also exhausted the Free State. We just have the Civil War. They're impoverished as well. By 25 in the Boundary Commission, they're not going to do anything. They're not going to militarily or anything. They've no power. They're just going to let's try and make something of the state of the foundations from the rubble of the Civil War.
But they did obviously take the Boundary Commission seriously. But they obviously had their hands tied behind their back as well, of course. I am in terms of pro-treaty. In terms of I do think, in terms of real politics, it was understandable why they signed it. It did actually lead to future freedoms. But my biggest issue, and this is probably why I might have rejected the treaty, is because of partition, is because of the Boundary Commission clause and the vagueness of it. But the Boundary Commission was not necessarily a bad idea. Boundary Commissions had been involved in other disputes, but the way it was worded.
How would you have solved the Ulster question then? Would you think a Boundary Commission that was a proper Boundary Commission that could have had powers to?
But I think it should have been based on wishes of the inhabitants. A plebiscite should have been had. So you would have had perhaps Tyrone, Fermanagh, and now. The contradiction here as well is that so Nash is going, we want Tyrone, Fermanagh, we want Newry, we want Derry. So you can't have. I don't think you can have all four, for example, because if you're going to go by county basis, you can only get Tyrone and Fermanagh because
Right.
they're the ones with majority ashes. But if you're going to go for smaller areas like towns or district electoral divisions, you might get Derry and Newry, but you're not going to get all of Tyrone or Fermanagh. So there is that argument. But it should have been based on wishes of inhabitants. The kind of area to be decided for the plebiscite areas, that should have been agreed beforehand as well. An independent chairperson should have been appointed. All these things Sinn Féin spectacularly messed up on.
Yeah.
Were they going to stop partition? They could have played a hand a bit harder as well because British government, they knew the British government did not want to kind of fall with the treaty negotiations over Ulster.
Yeah.
So they had a very strong hand on Ulster, and I'm not sure if they knew how strong a hand they had on it. They whereas the British were very happy for things to kind of collapse over sovereignty and the oath, which they felt they had a stronger hand on. So it's there's a lot of naivety amongst it, and which is understandable as well. Like the treaty negotiations then on the Sinn Féin side were amateur politicians.
Yeah,
like they're all members of the Dáil, but the Dáil only met I think 20 times from 1919 to 21 because it was on the it was an illegal body.
Negotiators, you're up against Lloyd George and Winston Churchill and Chamberlain, and somebody else.
Joseph Chamberlain, Lord Birkenhead.
You're up against big hitters.
Lloyd George had just negotiated the Versailles Treaty, a couple of years before that. These guys, and plus the Westminster was a very different beast than the Dáil. Maybe not so. I don't know. Can you compare Westminster to the Dáil now? Perhaps you could, but you certainly could not compare them then because Westminster was an old established parliament with clear opposition parties, stringent debate. Literally, the Dáil, when it met, which was very rarely, was a one party talking shop. So look, they were in a very difficult position, no question about it. Mannix's point is interesting though. Like, did they sign under duress?
Well,
do you think that?
There was absolutely an element of duress.
Is that not every negotiation?
I was going to say that there was certainly an element of duress, and apparently Lloyd George, when he said, "Look, you've got a few hours to decide: is it war or peace?" And go back to war. And the argument was that Collins knew that the IRA were very weak; that had the truce. And they were out in the open then.
But some of them were, but they actually got their numbers swelled. They accumulated a lot more arms and ammunition during the truce, so they actually were militarily stronger.
Yeah.
But also on the flip side, Collins is wrong though as well. That the British Army were in no position to take over 26 counties, like to do Crown Colony.
Yeah.
They were in no position to do that. They were very stretched as an army because they had become bigger. The empire had become bigger after the Treaty of Versailles. And they actually had got new places like in Egypt and in Palestine, in Iraq, Mesopotamia, all these places. So they actually were very stretched time.
Right.
And Neville Macready, the British Army Commander-in-Chief in Ireland, he said, we cannot take on a Crown Colony. We outside of 26 counties as a Crown Colony. That meant martial law. That meant anyone with arms executed. You would basically.
But there were some people arguing for that, weren't there? Henry Wilson was arguing for that.
Henry Wilson was arguing for that. So was Edward Carson.
And they were they're surrendering to a murder gang.
Exactly.
And Carson was very upset about it. But so there must have been an element. There was always an element of duress in it. But I think the peace treaties come about when wars kind of both sides. It benefits both sides to stop the war. And going back to war would have been difficult after a year and a bit of peace, or how many? About 6 months of peace.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The peace was 6 months. Like the war really was only for a year. People say it started in January 1919. But it really started in the summer 20.
Yeah.
And it was very vicious from the summer 20 to summer 21. Yeah. But and then you had your truce for mid-July to.
Do you think if they had said, right, so that we're rejecting the treaty, Brits go, right, okay, we're back to war then. See you.
No, I don't think the Brits would have gone back to war. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think the war was over for the Brits. They were losing so much support internationally, and it was really affecting them. They were the ones who literally called a truce ultimately.
Yeah.
They're the ones who came to the IRA. So the IRA were in a strong position with the truce. Right. They knew that. They knew that. This was the British government coming to us almost, So
because there had been a truce proposed in December 20.
Yeah, there had been a truce, but it was surrender. It was a surrender.
Insisting on decommissioning their weapons.
Yeah.
That never becomes controversial again. And the IRA said, I don't think so. And then followed on to July 21.
July 11th.
And it's interesting because I don't really know the details of that. Was the British?
I'm teaching you something, am I? about Irish history.
Yes, there's always a first, Cormac. How did the truce come about then? Was it the British were
But it was actually
going to the IRA? Were the IRA going to the British? Or there was always secret channels?
There was always secret channels, yeah, there was. But it was actually the opening of the Northern Ireland Parliament, which was seen as a catalyst when King George
I did know that
V.
now. See, I didn't know everything, but I did know that. Yes, the king made a very conciliatory speech. It was seen as a very conciliatory speech.
Well, the first draft of that speech was written by Craig, and it was real bellicose. And King George V was fuming. Like, who does this guy think he is, pretty much? That was the language King George V used about James Craig.
Wow.
And Jan Smuts, he was the South African leader at the time. He helped draft the speech.
Yes.
And he knew De Valera well, and he was speaking with Republicans as well. And he helped draft the speech for the King. Right. And then the King gave his speech on
this is the opening of the Northern Ireland Parliament.
The official opening of it, in June 21.
At Belfast City Hall, wasn't it?
Belfast City Hall, 21st of June, and then the channels kind of become more louder. Smuts is involved quite a bit as well, and then Evan McCready meets De Valera in the Mansion House, right? And then they agree on the truce for 11th of July. So I think they agreed at 8th, 9th of July, to come into effect on the 11th of July at 12 noon.
And like the IRA of 1994. Gerry Adams and his mates did an awful lot of work on the ground beforehand to prepare the men for this.
Yeah.
Did that happen in 21 as well?
No,
because
there
seemed to be some feeling that the boys in the in the flying squads, maybe down in Cork or Kerry, whatever, going, what's this about, a truce?
Yeah, there a lot of them were shocked, absolutely amazed that there was a truce.
And they're presuming, well, if there's a truce, then we must have won. We'll get our republic.
That was the impression, with justification to some degree, because it was definitely a concession of the British that to agree to a truce at that juncture. It wasn't. It was seen as because the IRA knew they couldn't win the war.
Yeah,
but they also knew they couldn't lose it either.
Yeah,
so they were in for the long haul at that stage. So the
British had lost control of administration. I mean,
they lost control. So they had no control over courts. The local government they'd lost. So basically, it was. They literally were in their barracks or doing coercive tactics of attacking civilians in many cases. They literally had lost control of the country, and would have had an almighty job to try and get it back.
So it's your argument then that the IRA were stronger than maybe people thinking that they could have.
Well, it wasn't
that
they were stronger. It was politically, it was a no-go area for the British government, I think, to go back to war. Right. I don't think.
So that was an empty threat then by Lloyd George.
This is where Sinn Féin, I think, also messed up. If they had listened to people who'd negotiated before with Lloyd George, people like Joe Devlin, they could realise this guy is a liar.
He's a spoofer.
He's a liar, basically. He was known for it,
He
was like a very bright Boris Johnson.
Right. But he knew the details.
He was a very clever man. And he was a brilliant negotiator.
Right, well, then he's not Boris Johnson then.
As I'm saying, he was a clever Boris Johnson. But you couldn't believe a word he said that come out of his mouth.
Right.
And Lloyd George was known because in 1916 he tried to broker a home rule solution after the Rising. He told Carson, you can have your 6 counties permanent, no problem at all. I told John Redmond, you have 6 counties temporary, only temporary. And when Redmond realised they're actually going to be permanent, the negotiations fell down. So he had form in being the Welsh wizard had a slippery character. So Sinn Féin should have been aware more of because they took his word so often. They took his word over the Boundary Commission. They took his word too much, and they shouldn't have. Because this guy, he wasn't an ideologue, He didn't care as long as he got a deal. Yeah. He wanted a deal, and he didn't. Whatever means it took to get the deal, he was going to do it. So I do think the duress has been overplayed sometimes. Yet obviously there was that threat, and they were exhausted as well. You have to remember these were very intense negotiations that weekend. So this threat with the 2 letters to Craig. Yep. One is peace, one is war. This is like the morning of the 6th. So they were
6th of December.
6th of December, Tuesday, the 6th of December. So the negotiations that night. It started at 7 or 8 o'clock, and they finished about 2 or 3 in the morning. And this is the 5th. There was a cabinet meeting in Dublin on the 3rd of December. So basically, all the signatories had to get a boat over to Dublin the 2nd of December and arrive on the 3rd. Right. I think they were on 2 different boats. And one of the boats with Collins on it and a few of the other delegates, plenipotentiaries, it actually sank. So they had to go to another boat, go back to Holyhead and go to Doneary or maybe Dublin Port, I can't remember where they landed, go straight to Mansion House to cabinet meeting. That was a really fractious cabinet meeting. That's where the split in the cabinet kind of happens. There was no agreement. De Valera saying, no, you cannot sign this. You have to get agreement from the us before the full cabinet before you sign it. They go back. Griffith and Collins are depressed because they realise we can't get what De Valera wants us to get, and they go over exhaust. And these are happening. The absolute exhaustion. They're at the end of their tether, and then Lloyd George puts his threat to them. So
and of
course it is small things, and so it's totally understandable why they would be under stress, and it's totally understandable why. But
also, sorry, just there's a slight, it's a weird point, but it's quite important. They had plenipotentiary powers, which means they technically had the power to sign the treaty because they did sign it. But they're also De Valera said De Valera
gave them plenipotentiary powers, and he said the plenipotentiaries did not have powers to sign the treaty.
Right.
So So his interpretation of plenipotentiaries is different than what other people's were.
Right. But they obviously thought they had the right to sign the treaty.
No, I don't think they did. I think they knew damn well that they had to go back.
Yeah.
But they knew they wouldn't get a treaty if they didn't sign it. So
why did they not say, we'll have to go back and...
Because they were told they couldn't. They had to decide there and then.
Well, why did they not just go, no, we can't say, give us a week?
Well, you asked him.
Give us a week.
Yeah, give us a week. Yeah. We'll come back to you. Yeah. Don't call us, we'll call you. But they were, as I said... They should have called Dublin, even though De Valera wasn't in Dublin, he was down in Clare and Limerick at the time. Right. But it would have got to him, of course, the message. But so look,
what were telephone communications like? This sounds a very stupid question.
Yeah, no, I know they could have. Yeah, they would have telephoned to Dublin. Yeah, we're in a bit of a bind here, Dev.
What do you think, Dev? You're not going to take this rail, but
well, they already knew. I'm.
So there was a split in the cabinet before they went back.
Yeah,
so
I'm very convinced that Griffith and Collins knew that the best they believed they got was what the treaty was.
Right, and there was going to be an oath. And
so the British government were not going to give in on the oath, but they could have got more concessions on the north, and that's where I think Sinn Féin really messed up.
But they didn't push that. But the oath was the big issue for most people.
Well, partition was a massive issue as well.
But they thought they dealt with it.
So there was acceptance at the time that partition was, kicked down the road to a degree, but the Boundary Commission was unacceptable, to most sides. There was very little debate during the post-treaty stall debates. It was very bitter debates.
Yeah.
There was only 9 pages out of 300 pages deal with partition, So and most of them were pro the Boundary Commission. Yeah. So that's what.
So the oath wasn't just about taking an oath to the king. The oath was symbolic of the relationship between.
It's not just symbolic. It's real freedom or not freedom. Who controls your country? Who actually governs your country? Now, dominions were very fluid arrangements. They were getting more powers each year. Like Canada and Australia, for example, were getting more powers each year. But the Republicans wouldn't have known that as well. So you're taking a chance that the British are going to give us more powers and more independence in a few years to come. Whereas obviously what De Valera was asked for was, okay, we're going to be externally associated with the British Commonwealth, but we have independence to make our own decisions.
What decisions could they not make? By having the oath, they had their own power, they had their own army, they had their own
foreign affairs
policy.
Foreign policy they couldn't make.
Well, they could,
but in terms of defence, they couldn't. It was all to do.
Yeah, but the foreign affairs, they had the total control of domestic policy. They got rid of the British Army. They got their police, their civil service, their own courts, their own parliament.
There was a lot of independence
to it. They had
but their answer still had to be answerable to the king. So
well, how answerable are you going to be to the?
Well, look at how it happened in 22 when the British government put a lot of pressure on the Free State government, as well. So there's a lot of pressure from the colonial secretary. Right. How the country is governed. So it's again what transpired showed that there was a lot of independence.
Yeah.
But beforehand, they didn't know, because you're still going in blindly to some degree. You don't know how trustworthy the British are going to be, or how hands off the British are going to be in how we govern our affairs. Because the British could have been less hands off in terms of how the Free State governed their affairs. Because of the way the treaty was set up, and because they were ultimately answerable to the king, and to the British government, essentially, to some degree. So it actually was way. People say, oh, why is it? What was all the fighting for at all? Because not talking about Civil War, but why was all of the rise in the War of Independence?
Oh, right.
When basically the same as what Redmond was offered anyway. No, it wasn't. Home rule was a very limited form of government. Whereas, but he even said, a topic I've written and researched a lot on is the fiscal independence. They were only offered that the very last night. So
which was very important.
really important, but it wasn't. No one picked up on it at all, really. You know, Collins said later that the most important part of the treaty was getting fiscal independence. But
Kind of amateurs against professionals, weren't they?
I think that were kind of doing a lot of heavy lifting there. You know, they were total amateurs against professionals. Yeah, they were, and that showed.
Yeah,
that showed. And actually, like George said at the time to his colleagues, said, "God, these are not like the Irish of old, of the parliamentarians.
Yeah,
these are very rough."
Well, they weren't parliament. Yeah. Though was Churchill not impressed with Collins as a person?
I think they developed a good relationship afterwards, and Birkenhead developed a good relationship with Collins as well.
Yeah.
Collins was just a very interesting character, and the British media kind of were obsessed with him as well. And there was this kind of swashbuckling, very young man, you know, like, what was he at the time? He was only he was
30,
he was
32 when he died. So 30,
he was 30. So he became 31 in October during the negotiations. So like what he was doing, it was very different than most 31-year-olds.
Absolutely.
So like, he was a very interesting figure, and there was this kind of swashbuckling.
But it turned very, very bitter very, very quickly. Was there any way of avoiding that? Was there any way after the treaty was signed, or was it doomed once the treaty was signed?
No, there was there was definitely more avenues that could have been reached. Like De Valera didn't help matters either.
De Valera was extreme.
We'd have to wade through Irish blood. You know, like that was. Really bad choice of words, you know, and he didn't just make it once. He made about 4 or 5 speeches around St. Patrick's Day in 22. But there was there's a pact between De Valera and Collins that Archbishop Mannix mentions in this speech here.
The election, was it?
The election pact, you know, so which wasn't particularly democratic, but it was seen as staving off the conflict for a bit. There was loads, like the Republicans were, like Liam Lynch, who was the chief of staff of the anti-treaty IRA. He didn't want a war, and he was trying to get negotiations. There even was a lot of and still is to this day, a lot of people say that the election of June 1922 was election under duress, basically, as in the British government were threatened that they would come in again if it didn't run off smoothly, and you know, you didn't vote for the treaty, essentially. So a lot of people say that's not a legitimate election because there was a threat of the British always there in June 22.
But it was pretty clear as well that the general public were in favour of the treaty, weren't they? Or was it just war exhaustion? Is that fair to say?
I think it's more war exhaustion. But
also they were
business people, the Catholic Church, were. But politicians were very split. But the business people at the Catholic Church were very, very pro-treaty. The establishment, for whatever way you want to use that term, would have been pro-treaty. Southern Unionists, accepted the treaty. But within the army, the IRA, crucially,
about 80% of the IRA were anti-treaty.
Yeah, well, most of the leadership roles would have been pro-treaty, though. With senior officer positions. The rank and file, there was a big majority anti-treaty. Coming on, very anti-treaty. There were 6 women TDs at the time of 124 or 128, I should say, and all of them were anti-treaty.
Right.
So the first body publicly to come out against the treaty was the Coming on.
All right.
In February 22. So it was spiralling, but look, there was opportunities. Like you're going towards a death march, really. It was like, why go this route? Why go this route? And there was obviously attempts to do so, but it just got very messy, and it spiraled out of control. Then you had Rory O'Connor taking over the forecourts in April.
That's kind of the spark of it. Did they have to resort to the gun? There was no alternative to that.
Well, the British were putting pressure
from there.
Who Rory O'Connor and Free State?
O'Connor and the irregulars taking over the.
Yeah, no, of course there was alternatives.
Yeah. But they chose not to.
Chose not to, and obviously the alternative for Free State government was to do nothing as well. But they were under pressure, obviously, from the British government. The British government had plans to intervene, military plans
in June 20 when the Civil War broke out.
Before after Henry Wilson was assassinated.
Yes, so that's kind of a major point in history, and when the assassination of Henry Wilson. Now, a lot of people don't know Henry Wilson was the head of the British Army,
the imperial staff of the British Army,
First World War.
I think it was after the First World War, yeah, but he was definitely heavily involved during the First World War. Like, so I'm not sure when he became chief of staff of the imperial staff of the British Army, but by the time of 22, he was advisor to the Northern Ireland government.
And very pro-unionist.
Very pro-unionist, even though he's from Longford, you know.
Yeah.
But,
Was he from Longford?
Longford originally, yeah.
Oh,
But he was like very hardcore. Unionists, like coercion, like he had no problem with a lot of what was going on in the north at the time. Remember, there was a lot of sectarian violence, many civilians being killed. You know, he was a hardliner.
And he was assassinated in London
by two men outside his home, like
by two ex-soldiers.
Two ex-soldiers, yeah. One who had only one leg.
Yeah.
And they were executed. Now a lot of people say that Collins gave the order. So, you know, now he may have given an order before, he may have given it then. You know, it's not a home. Like Roland McGreevy wrote a very good book about the assassination of Henry Wilson.
I think he says basically that it wouldn't have been anybody else can give the order. If the Republican, the anti-treaty Republicans,
but when he gave it, he could have given it, you know, long before June 22. You know, and they only acted on it.
They only
because they made not an opportunity before that. You know, so like that's a bit hazy.
Right.
You know, did he specifically give it a week or two before? You know, at that juncture, he goes, right, I want Wilson dead.
But the importance of this is this was a massive for the British in particular. This is, you know, like the assassinating Mountbatten or something in 79.
Yeah,
it was
absolutely
massive for the British.
And
he was shocked.
He was very good friends with all the senior political figures.
Yeah,
you should see his funeral. Like it's a who's who of British politics.
So the British had to say, well, something needs to be done about this. And they blamed the irregulars. They blamed the anti-treaty.
Yeah, they blamed the anti-treaty side.
Right.
And so they said, you get those out of the forecourts, or we will.
Right.
And they actually had plans drawn up of dreadnoughts to go to Dublin. And with actually Neville McCready, the chief of staff the commander in chief of the British Army in Ireland, he said, "This is a terrible idea, you know, to go back to Ireland this way. No way." And so then they supplied Collins with weapons, guns, and to bomb forecourts.
Famously bombed the forecourts with British guns.
Yeah. So look, it's a very complicated part of our. It's very sad. It's a very tragic part of our history.
You're saying I would have signed the treaty, but you wouldn't have.
Over the north, I wouldn't have. No, I would have. I'm Captain Hindsight. You can call me.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but with the boundary commission,
mistakes made.
Like
get a lawyer.
Knowing as a get a bloody lawyer.
Get a bloody lawyer to look at that clause. What's the article about the boundary commission? Wishes of the inhabitants, comma, consistent with the geographical and economic,
in accordance with the wishes of the inhabitants, as long as it's in economic and geographic conditions. Yeah. There's a word I'm missing there. From Scotland, but it meant they could have been all equal. It wishes of inhabitants, economics, geography, and the not independent chairperson decided they were all equal. In fact, economic and geographic conditions were more equal,
more important than
most cases,
the wishes of the inhabitants.
But like that was a terrible interpretation anyway. I think even the way it was clumsily worded. But the devil was in the details, but I think they could have got more as well out of the north. I think the British government were in a very weak position over the north, you know, and they could have, and they should have been able to use that more to their advantage. I think they didn't. So yeah, but on the other side, I do think Collins was right about you know, in terms of for the parts of Ireland that did get independence, it definitely was a stepping stone to greater independence, and he was 100% right about that. And actually, De Valera proved him right when he got into government in 32 to 48.
So this Archbishop Manick, would he have much influence in those? But it would just kind of.
But internationally would have. So you know, the Sinn Féin were really successful in the propaganda war. So you had all, they had a really strong network, a really strong external affairs ministry, foreign affairs ministry, before they had independence. You know, the Ministry of External Affairs was set up in 1919, around the same time the Dáil was set up, and they had tentacles everywhere, all over the world, and of course they had people who support our cause, like archbishops and clergy and powerful business people in America and Australia. And Archbishop Mannix was one of these people, so he would have been very effective at spreading the word internationally. I'm not so sure what influence he would have had at home, but definitely internationally he was a well-known figure supporting the Irish cause.
Okay, well, let's go from a sad story to an even worse sad story. The Irish News of August the 9th, 1975, the many faces of barbarism. This week's newspapers, radio and television have been remembering Hiroshima. The very word has come to have a fearful significance of its own. Even though a second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki a few days later, Hiroshima stands in a certain way for the blind forces which are released when men set no limit to what they will do to enforce their will upon others. Very sad and editorial from the Irish News from 1975, 30 years after the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
80 years this week.
80 years this week, yeah. So this is from 1975. And 30, so it's I could say living memory. Of course, it's within living memory of, it's still very powerful 30 years on, you know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. God, yeah. I was there. I was in. I went to Japan for the Soccer World Cup.
Right.
In 2022, and went to Hiroshima. It was very eerie. It's worth a visit to the Memorial Park.
Yeah.
But there is a building called the Dome, the Gen Baku Dome or something it's called, and the bomb landed right beside it, but it's quite intact. It's quite intact. And I think there's a church as well that stays somewhat kind of intact as well. I remember watching. Maybe there is Christianity. The church almost standing, and everything else was just flat.
Right.
Flat, and
many people were killed.
Well, we don't know.
Well, of course we do. Well, not many.
People say up to like
70,000, 100,000.
Yeah, maybe but that was at just then or within a few weeks. You know, but since then, I think about 250,000 maybe between the two bombs, between the Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Right.
Some say between 150 and 250,000 dies directly from that. Yeah. Now, obviously from radiation poisoning and different forms of cancers and all that. And
my mate Michael McDowell, his father was in the army during the war, special services. Worked behind German lines just before D-Day. One other thing was on his way to Japan when the bombs were dropped, and he, like everybody else, went, "Hey, great, fantastic!" It's going to be the end of the war, because they realised that if they had going to invade Japan, given the resistance the Japanese had shown on other islands, including Iwo Jima and all that there was going to be horrendous, and the Japanese weren't for surrendering.
No, they weren't, and obviously all of the once Germany surrendered in May, you'd had the whole theatre war went to Japan. Yeah. But they weren't for surrender, and they were firebombing Tokyo and other places.
Yeah, and it's still crazy. No effect. Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say it didn't have an effect, but but you're right. Like, there was this perception, and probably we don't know. We'll never know, of course. But it was probably true that that the Japanese were not going to surrender easily. So, so what do you think?
Well, the Japanese.
We put the blame all on Truman here. Truman was the man who basically signed off on this. Yeah. He was president at the time.
Well, we've all seen Oppenheimer.
Right? No, of course Oppenheimer is. Look, but the president of America gets the ultimate say here. Though.
Yeah, no, we've all seen Oppenheimer, and they've created this thing, and there's a bit of going, well, nice to use this, see, does it really work? I think there's probably an element of that, but
the Japanese people were guinea pigs essentially in this experiment.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. But the moral argument is, you're saving more lives by killing 70,000 civilians or 100,000 civilians. It's a tough moral argument to make.
Very tough one.
It's a very tough moral argument to make. And that's why the Irish News is saying, this is barbarism and frightfulness, and they're saying basically that Hiroshima was experimental, and that the Americans were doing it as an experiment. Do you agree with that? Do you think?
Well, of course it was experiment. Yeah, because they didn't know what was going to happen. And apparently the little boy that was the bomb used for Hiroshima. I think it was only 5% efficiency in terms of fission efficiency.
Right.
So it could have been a hell of a lot worse.
Yeah.
So it actually as an actual bomb, the way it was meant to go, it didn't work.
Right.
It only worked 1/20 of its force. Basically worked. So imagine if it was 20 times more powerful.
Right.
It could have been.
I think there were some Japanese who wanted to fight on even afterwards, but it was the emperor famously using the most extreme example of understatement ever. Come on the radio and said the war situation has developed not necessarily to our advantage.
That's a bit of an understatement.
Slight understatement, and they surrendered very quickly afterwards, didn't they? So I think
within a week. I think they agreed in August, but it was September when they actually officially. I think it was Douglas MacArthur took the surrender, but. They had plans to bomb in other places as well. The third bomb was meant to go off into 24th, something of August.
Yeah.
You know, so this was the 6th and the 9th of August. So
Yes.
Hiroshima was the 6th and the Nagasaki was the 9th.
So they were basically saying we've got more of these.
Yeah, and under they
But I think there were Japanese generals going, they only have one, and then the second one went, they only have two, don't worry. There'll be no more.
There'll be no more. We're fine.
There were people genuinely arguing that, like, to say.
Yeah, but look, but as you said, the Japanese weren't for surrendering. You know, they were they shown that, and obviously the kamikazes were, you know, they were prepared to do whatever it took to
but this takes things
defend our.
Yeah, this takes things to a different level. You know, we've had the firebombing of cities, you've had Dresden and all of that, but this, you know, you can cause such destruction and civilians. Of course, it's not a military die, just mass murder of civilians.
Yeah, but the American army said that they targeted Hiroshima and Nagasaki because they had big military complexes as well. A lot of troops. Now, that's debatable. Like how many troops actually died, we don't know. You know, or what military complexes were destroyed as well. So. But yeah, like they obviously knew that if you're going to use one of these bombs, you're going to kill a lot of people who are civilians.
I think one of the frightening aspects for humanity is you create something like that. Can you ever contain it? I know we've had you know, I've always grown up with the threat of atomic warfare and atomic bombs and all of that.
We kind of seemed fine for a while, didn't we? Like I remember growing up in the 80s. Now it was, I think the heat's gone off a bit. Definitely by the end of the Cold War, the end of history. You know, in the early 90s. But now it seems to be, you know, people are thinking about it more now, aren't they?
Well, you just had Israel bombing Iran because Iran threatened to have a nuclear weapon, even though Israel, of course, has nuclear weapons.
Yeah, good 100 of them anyway. Yeah. And obviously Pakistan and India are always there, teetering on the edges of war. You've obviously got
North Korea,
a very unstable president of America who liable to do anything. North Korea. Yeah. You've got Putin who's threatened. He's been threatening nuclear bombs now for since he invaded Ukraine. You know. It definitely seems more back in the 60s, kind of almost, isn't it? Of
yes,
these are our toys, and we will use them, like, you know, if we need to.
Well, I think that's the trouble, and you think of things like AI and whatever the military people come up with, they will use them, and when you think of Nagasaki and Hiroshima, what are the limits? There are no limits anymore. There are no limits to morality, and I think if Oppenheimer captured it, but Truman didn't seem to wrestle too much with his conscience. Just went, let's go ahead.
I don't know, but how Truman obviously felt about it. But he definitely seemed to be more blasé about it. Yeah. Whereas obviously a lot of us are obviously basing our opinion on Oppenheimer on the movie. You know, the great Cillian Murphy. You know, an unbelievable performance. You know. Definitely deserved his Oscar.
Good performance. Could have taken an hour out of the film, but what do I know?
What do I know? Yeah, it was a little bit long actually. It was, but it was a good movie. It was a good movie.
So we're suggesting Oppenheimer is better than Barbie movie. Just to be clear.
I can't tell you because I've never seen Barbie movie. Have you?
No.
That was it. Barbieheimer, wasn't it?
Barbie.
Yeah. So. If you were in Truman's position or Oppenheimer's position, you know, what do you think?
I don't know.
You don't know? Jeez, I still think...
Well, I would have thought...
I still think no, never atomic bomb.
An ex-member of campaign for nuclear disarmament. But there might have been a calculation going, how many troops are we going to lose taking Japan? How long is this going to take? How many people are going to get killed? And you go, I've got that solution there, which will, save a lot of lives.
That's only thinking of the immediate war. Like America were never going to lose the war at this stage anyway. You know, they were never going to lose. You know, so that was it. So Japan were on the retreat. Yeah. So like, I think you can't just go, okay, yeah, if we go into the ground, Japan, we're going to lose all the troops. Of course, that's a terrible something to weigh on people's shoulders. Yeah. But if you're thinking about humanity as a whole, not just American troops,
I agree with you.
You can't go with nuclear weapons because you're opening up a whole new, as you said, Pandora's box. You know, this is only the start of this. You know, so
if America can have one, Russia can have one, then China can have one, and everybody who's. What right have you got to say you can't have a nuclear weapon now when you have one?
Yeah, so I think I just think that there's no justification whatsoever for it. You know, no matter how many troops could have died in Japan, it can never justify what could unfold with a nuclear war. You know, so and Nagasaki and Hiroshima opened that door. Have definitely opened that door. You know, they're the only belligerents that have ever used a nuclear weapon so far. You know, long may that continue.
And on that cheery note,
we have time for one question.
We have time for a question from a fan, have we? A fan, I would say fan.
Yeah.
Can may not be a fan, maybe just a
probably
listener.
A fan of,
if you want to write to us or ask us questions, we are available. We have the email address is historyboys@gmail.com.
And the WhatsApp is 07483313842. Right. So this is from Martin Healy. Hi Cormac, hi Tim. Good, you get the names correct in order. Love the podcast. As opposed to a Northern Ireland...
He's a bright guy. Bright, something about him. Go ahead.
As opposed to a Northern Ireland border poll, if there was a county-by-county vote now, how many of the 6 counties would we win back for the Republic?
Right.
Would it be all the 6 counties west of the ban, or am I being grossly optimistic? Is there merit in pursuing rugby player Andrew Trimble's advice as enjoying the best of both?
Right.
So do you want to have a stab at that?
The Republicans like to put up a map of Ireland and basically say that the people who are against the United Ireland are basically in 2 counties, Antrim and Down, and that's where the vast majority of the population, of Unionist population is. And yes, it's right that if there was a county poll, Derry, Fermanagh, Tyrone, Armagh, I think would all...
Oh yeah, but Armagh... When I was researching the Boundary Commission...
But of course those counties are far less populous than Antrim and Down, so the populations are far smaller. I mean, the population of Tyrone's, I think, is about 188,000. I only know that because I was at Tyrone-Kerry match recently, and I looked up the...
You went to Croke Park, did you?
I went to Croke Park, yeah, to see Tyrone.
You enjoy it?
I did enjoy it, yeah. They got hammered, unfortunately, but yeah. David
Clifford and...
there were 188,000 people in Tyrone, and most of them were at the Croke Park. But that's 188,000 in the whole of the county Tyrone. Belfast alone is 300,000 in the city itself, in Brones and beyond that. Most of the population of Northern Ireland is that bit.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, but if you're county by county,
if it was
basis,
county by county,
Like I as I was saying, when I was researching the Boundary Commission book, one thing that was never used as an argument was Armagh. Like Armagh had a very small Protestant majority. It actually had a smaller Protestant majority than Tyrone and Fermanagh had Catholic majorities.
Right.
So I think it had something like 54% were Protestant in Armagh, whereas 56% were Catholic in Tyrone and Fermanagh. But no one ever talked about, well, Armagh should be in the south.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't really part of the debate.
Right.
It was Tyrone and Fermanagh either should be in the south or the north. But so Armagh in 1921 was, had a very small Protestant population, which I don't know, I don't have the figures of what Armagh is now, but I'd imagine... But again as well, in 1911, when the last census was done before partition, if you were Protestant, you were Unionist. If you were Catholic, you were Nationalist. Of course, there were some exceptions, but generally that was the case. Now it's not so clear, So, I would imagine though that based on voting patterns, if you look at Derry. Even was it East Derry constituency?
Gregor Campbell and
that was close.
Yeah,
that was very close. So Armagh, obviously got Portdown in all those areas.
The population is shrinking and aging at the same time.
Well, the aging. If you look at all the border polls, which don't show enough numbers for United Ireland now, but look at the age profile.
Yeah.
And if you're a Unionist, that's the most scary things about those poll numbers is the youth profile of those.
It's interesting that he asks about county by county. That's not going to happen. But there's some people saying if there comes a border poll that the pro-United Ireland lobby need more than 50% plus one. There's some people think Seamus Mallon, to be fair, I think even...
Which I've never agreed with Seamus Mallon on that.
Yeah, he said, look, if you want to have consensus in United Ireland, you need to have more than... You need to have a majority of Unionists to buy into.
Then you're not a Unionist. Then you're not a Unionist. If you vote for United Ireland, you're not a Unionist. So therefore, say if Jamie Bryson and Jim Allister, the last 2 unions left, and they don't go for United Ireland, we need their consensus. So I don't get this stuff what Seamus Mallon was saying.
No, I think it's a hollow argument. I think 50% plus one, particularly on a state that was built on a sectarian head count.
I think Seamus Mallon had a lot of admirable qualities, and he speaks a lot of sense in many ways.
I think his concern is you don't have consensus for an All Ireland, then you store up trouble for yourself, and there might be resistance and military resistance.
But if you don't do it, you're storing up a lot of trouble too.
You can't say and
you can't keep
democratic.
You can't keep going. And even people saying let's have a repartition, as in let's have west of the ban. That's a new Northern Ireland. Like those have been tried before, and if that happened, there would be an outrage, and rightly so too, because it's kind of going, let's give the Unionists another chance here. We'd be a bit unfair.
No, it's not going to happen.
And it shouldn't happen. Like,
No,
it
it's
has
not
to be.
gonna happen.
It has to be 50 plus
It's
one.
funny, we're interested some of the stuff from 1975 that we're talking about, again, the convention and stuff, and Enoch Powell, and the unionists were always kind of divided, not quite sure what they wanted. Some of them wanted majority rule. There were some people talking about, let's have an independent Northern Ireland, so UDI, which is nonsense. And then there were,
but a lot of people were talking about that back in the 70s.
Yeah, in the 70s.
There's so many different theories and proposals of what new constitution could we have here.
And then the other one is the Bob McCartney, Enoch Powell, I think, is full integration with the United Kingdom. We're fully a part of, so we don't even have our own devolved assembly, you would have, but full part of the United Kingdom, which are, options that aren't very attractive, are they?
No, they're not options. Look, there's a pathway through the Good Friday Agreement. Now, at the moment, the union is still safe. I don't think the numbers are there. No. I think it'd be foolish to have a border poll now. But I think they're going in a certain direction that border poll will become an option, and it will happen. Right. I think hopefully in my lifetime.
Right.
Let's see what happens. Yeah.
Well, you didn't say my lifetime. How old do you think I am?
Well, it could be right. I can only speak for myself and how long I want to live.
Yeah. Well, if I go to the gym every now and again, it could be my lifetime.
Go to the gym.
If I go to the gym, if I go to the gym.
Jim Alistair.
If I go to the gym, it could be my lifetime as well.
Well, if Mary Lou is right, it could be 5 years. So I hope both of us are around in 5 years' time.
Yeah, I think God love the Shinners. They've been predicting United Ireland for a long time. I think Jerry Adams once stage said it would be United Ireland by 2016. I think he said that in 1998.
Did he?
Yeah, for the 100th anniversary of Easter Rising, and he was wrong.
Yeah, it happened.
If I was a unionist, I wouldn't be too worried. I
would
think you have to do an awful lot.
No, if I was a unionist, I'd be worried. I think they're on the back foot, to be honest. Their majority is gone. But this is a very good question from Martin, that because I remember I did an article for the Irish News last year after the general election, and you just see the map in 1921, the electoral map, green for nationalists, orange for unionists. Most of Northern Ireland, except for Tyrone Fermanagh, was orange.
Yeah, and
now it's mostly green, except for Antrim down.
Yeah.
And it's going one way, and it isn't going the unionist way. So.
You think, look at Belfast City. We nearly one unionist MP and nearly didn't have.
Well, Naomi Long. That was a bit of a shock as well. That Gavin Robinson did a lot better than expected. I think he won by 2,000 votes, didn't he? And people thought I was going to be really tight.
Nationalists a massive majority in Belfast City Council.
Yeah. So look, it's I think they're under retreat, and even the demographics. If you look at the younger you are, more people it is going only one way. I think personally. Right. Now they still have to. You have to argue for United Ireland. There is still a good body of work to do in that yet. But if I was a unionist, I'd be worried.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of Catholics and people in the middle ground who go, it's not worth the hassle. Just
of course. It's a hard job. It's a hard job to get people to change from what you know. It really is. Yeah. So it's always that battle for anyone who wants United Ireland. But the numbers are going that direction, I think, though.
Yeah. Will the BBC go? Because I've worked there. There's an interest there.
I don't know. But I think they're going to stop showing us in the south all the programmes as well, aren't they? From the north. Wasn't that threatened, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You might even get a BBC.
I can't get programmes on the RTA player.
You couldn't get Tyrone Kerry. You had to go to Croke Park.
I had to go and watch them physically.
And you don't like it, yeah?
I'm not a soccer fan. I don't really get it. But no, it was good crack. Anyway.
You're okay. You're a soccer fan. Can you not be a fan of other sports?
No,
as well?
I do. I love a bit of hurling. But football, the Gaelic football kind of...
It's been a good year.
I love the atmosphere.
The new rules are great, I must say. New rules are really good.
Okay.
On that note.
On that bombshell, thank you very much for listening to the Irish History Boys podcast.
Until next time.
Until next time, we'll see you then.